Hey guys, it's Harold. I do apologize for deleting the original video. I did have some issues with it. That is, missing audio in where Mary knocks Sam out, where a critical hidden domination sound was meant to be there along with the image in question, plus some bullshit with the visuals. A GIF somehow deleting a copied image when I tried to get that to work out. And since Sam is already knocked out cold, me, Mary, Mike, Anthony, and Anthera have found a temporary place to make a recording studio out of until the actual studio is pretty much gotten to where it needs to be. So until the recording studio gets fucking fixed up, this is going to work out for now. Sorry for the quality of the voice and the replacement footage for this video, as I deleted the other footage to save up on space. Regardless, enjoy the video, and I hope you have an excellent day or night, or even afternoon or evening. Harold signing off for now.
Hey Harold, I know you're already working on the reworking of the video, but I was wondering if Mike and Mary would join you at some point in time.
Oh, they wanted to do a video with me? Well, I don't give a shit. Really, it's just I can't help but to feel a bit of regret letting Sam on because of that fucking hiatus.
Oh, no need to worry about it. Sam already apologized for doing that, and despite that we just held him out of work until he is mentally and emotionally even, and besides it's not your fault that you were trying to stop him. Anyways, that's all I need to say about the matter. Have a good time reworking.
Thanks, Anthera, and you too there. Now, to end this recording, one of my all-time favorite video games ever is unquestionably Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Ever since I was a youngster, I'd play the hell out of it. Collecting rupees, slaying bad guys, solving puzzles, you get the idea. And although I loved the game, I also thought it had a few bizarre and even frightening factors. Regardless, I still loved that game to death. In addition to being such an avid fan of the game, I'm also a fan of retro video games. Nowadays, I just can't seem to enjoy video games the way I previously did. A lot of them nowadays are all cheap knockoffs of each other, like FPS games for instance. Anyway, as I said, I love old school video games. I primarily played Nintendo as a kid. Unfortunately, I had broke my original Super Nintendo many years ago, and at the time, I had no idea how to download an emulator. I became upset because, even in my life, I loved 8-bit and 16-bit video games. Nowadays, I can play or watch an old video game with the typing of a few keys and the click of a mouse. But there's one game that I would absolutely not play if it wasn't on an old-fashioned gaming console: A Link to the Past. Luckily for me, I had met a good friend of mine in the 8th grade. His name was Ray, and he was into video games, comics, and movies. He too was a fan of retro video games, and modern ones, but don't ask me as to why he likes them, and had a working sneeze. About a few months back, Ray and I had finished our college semester and we wanted to celebrate. We both attended a community college, and we were both majoring in difficult subjects. So it's only natural that we'd a little fun after such an arduous 3 months. I inquired that we go over to his house and play a few classic games. So we did, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on A Link to the Past. The only problem was that Ray didn't have it. Regardless, we still played the shit out of all the classics: Super Mario World, Mortal Kombat, despite not having the blood we've come to know and love, Donkey Kong Countries 1, 2, and 3. Killer Instinct, Super Castlevania IV, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, and all those 16-bit gems. But the urge to play LLTTT was still burning within me. The next morning, I suggested we go to our local comic book shop and we purchase a copy of it. He eagerly agreed. I'm not much into comics, but let me tell you, they had a treasure trove of comics, video games, action figures, posters, and various other paraphernalia. I saw that they had an enormous library of SNES games, along with Genesis, Atari 2600 and Nintendo 64 games, and for sure ALTTT was among them. I scanned the shelves slowly with my index finger, and then voila, I found it. I pulled it off of the shelf and took a look at it. There was a sticker underneath the sticker that displayed the game's title. It said, USED, in all capital letters. In all honesty, I hate purchasing used products, especially something as cherished as this. I tried to find another copy that didn't say anything, but to my chagrin, I couldn't. So I settled for the used copy. I wasn't going to let something as petulant as a game beating you get in the way of me having hours of fun. We both got to Ray's house and I popped it into the SNES cartridge slot. Before we began playing, he went downstairs to go snatch us some snacks and soda. I pulled the game out of the slot and examined the game's cartridge. It looked normal enough, no signs of damage, and it was in fairly good condition. That is, when I turned it around, the text on the back of the cartridge informing the player as to how to clean the cartridge and how to properly use it was written backwards. It was still legible if it was held up in a mirror, but why would anyone do that? And then I turned it around to inspect the front. There was no official seal of Nintendo on it. And that's when I thought, this might be a bootleg/pirated version of the game. The idea got me a little pissed off, since I had wanted to play the original. But I decided I was jumping to conclusions too early. After all, I hadn't even played the game yet. So Ray came back and I momentarily forgot about the backwards text and the lack of official seals, and I popped it into the console. We both sat in eager anticipation, since he too was a big fan of this game. Then that familiar Nintendo Presents flashed on screen with that little rupee sound, and I grew excited. But then, my excitedness quickly descended into frustration as the screen suddenly displayed an array of pixels exotic colors all over the screen. It seemed the game had glitched up in the process. I rolled my eyes and I took out the cartridge. I glued it, hoping that would get rid of the cause of the glitching. I popped the cartridge back in and turned it on once again. Again, the Nintendo Presents logo appeared, only this time the rupee sound clip had a lower pitch. I arched my eyebrow. I don't know if Ray noticed it, but I assume he did since he didn't say anything. Then, the primitive, three-dimensional triangles that would form the Triforce behind the logo began rotating their way towards the middle of the screen. Except the little tune that played when they did was playing backwards, distorted and glitchy. I turned to Ray and said, "What the hell's going on?" He just shrugged and said, "Maybe the game's a little old." I figured he was right. After all, it was a used cartridge. When Triforce had formed, the sword came down and made that sheathing sound, except that heroic fanfare did not play. Instead, there was no music at all. Interestingly, underneath the title, where it's supposed to say, "A Link to the Past," there was nothing but a mess of glitched pixels. Now this was getting weird. I pressed start, and everything was smooth on the file creation screen. I wrote down my name and started the game. But still, there was no music to be heard. The familiar darkness and bird's eye view of the room came on, showing Link asleep in his bed and his uncle sitting at the table, doing who knows what. Then, some text appeared on screen, like the original, but it wasn't the text I remember. It said, "Help me. Please help me. Don't let this happen to me." Then, the text disappeared. Now I already knew something was wrong when that happened. Zelda's message was not supposed to say that. Sure, it had been a long time since I had played this game, but I don't remember her ever saying that. Now I was certain this was a hack or a bootleg or something. Ray said, "What the hell?" She's never said that. I agreed and made my suggestion of it being a hack/bootleg. He said, "That sucks." I figured that even if it wasn't the original, it still might be kind of cool. He agreed, so he let it go on. Around here, I was expecting the screen to brighten up and then for my uncle to tell me to stay in bed. But no, the room remained dark and he said, "Don't move a muscle. You've done enough damage already." And then, while still in the dark, he marched outside with his sword and shield. The music did not start either. I could still hear the rain outside, but that's it. Then, Link hopped out of bed. I moved the D-pad around. Everything's functional. I went over to lift up the pots, but the game didn't seem to respond. I tried every button, but nothing worked. I noticed the treasure wasn't in the room, the one with a torch/lantern. This was very weird. I then decided I'd better leave the house. Interestingly, the house never lit up. It stayed dark throughout the duration of everything. I then walked outside, and there was that familiar rain and thunder. I walked outside and began investigating. Everything seemed normal, and I approached those guards that barricade the path when you first go exploring. I approached one of them, and all he said was, "This is a sad night." And the next line of text was that bizarre alien writing that you need the Book of Mudora to translate. I spoke to the other one, and he said there was nothing we could have done to prevent it. But you could have. And that was all he said. I said, "Ray, man, what the hell's going on here?" No idea. Pretty crappy bootleg so far. I agreed. This was weirder and I had no idea just what the hell everyone in the game was talking about. Did somebody die or something? I decided to go north, to fall into the hole where you obtain your sword and shield from your uncle. I went up there, and suddenly the screen became very glitchy. Trees were out of place, and some trees and water from the dark world seemed to be crossed with the light worlds and stuff. I walked forward, and suddenly I fell into an invisible hole. Suddenly, Link fell into this path that resembled the location where you receive the Master Sword from the pedestal in the Lost Woods. Except the colors, more or less, made it look more like Skull Woods in the Dark World. And for the first time, there was music. It was that eerie little haunting tune that played in the sanctuary, the one that plays after you rescue Zelda from Hyrule Castle. I slowly turned to Ray, curious if he was getting as weirded out as I was. And indeed he was. This was certainly turning out to be an extraordinary bootleg, if I could call it that at this point. I pushed forward and walked the forest path, only to see various denizens of Kakariko village dotted on the sides of the grass. I approached one, and all she said was, "I hope you were satisfied." I then approached another Kakariko villager. He said, "You'll get what you deserve." What the hell was going on here? It sounded as if they were all angry at me. I then saw a villager who looked like a child. I walked up to him and he said, "You meanie, you will pay for this, one way or another." Finally, there was one last guy standing up on the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I approached him, and he said, "We'll be better off without you, neglector." Just to be sure they didn't say anything else, I went back and spoke to everyone there. No, they all uttered the same melancholy lines. Who would do all of this crap? It didn't make any sense. I moved up and the screen shifted north, and I saw Zelda in what appeared to be a casket. She had the same sprite as when she's laying there and getting transported by a cannon. Suddenly, a text box appeared saying, "This is all because of you." When it disappeared, I was free to roam the area. I approached Zelda's coffin, but I couldn't interact with it anyway. So, I just walked around the place, thinking of what to do next. Raven said, "Maybe you should try going back?" Well, that seemed like the only logical thing left to do, so I decided to head back down to where I came. When all of a sudden, another text box appeared saying, "I don't think so." And Link turned around himself without me pressing anything, as if the game made him to. I tried to do it again, but the same thing occurred. Just then, the music stopped abruptly. And suddenly, the screen began shaking and Zelda's casket fell inside a hole that formed from the earthquake. When it did, some scary music played. The same music from where you defeat Ganon and Ganondorf turns into a bat and flies away. Suddenly, there was a large crater there. Not knowing what to do, I jumped inside of it. Next thing I knew, I was in this area with narrow, parallel walls on both sides of me that were a gray/black color. Also, there was shallow, red water on the ground that was colored like that, I presume, to resemble blood. I walked up the hall and came to a dead end. The only thing left was a telepathic tile that was on the wall in front of me. And on the sides, there were some doors but they were sealed shut. They were the kinds you needed to open with a switch or after defeating a few enemies. Anyway, I directed my attention towards the telepathic tile. I went over and tried to communicate with it, but it just gave me that alien text. Basically, it just left me there without giving me any clues as to what I should do to proceed. And then I remembered that not once had I pressed pause and checked my inventory. I did, and interestingly, I had the Book of Mudora already. I have no idea as to how I got it. Perhaps the hacker or programmer had already given it to me at the start of the game. Well, I did the only rational thing I thought I could do. I equipped it and translated the text. Interestingly, it gave me a choice. It asked, do you feel guilty? Greater than yes. No. I heard Ray reading aloud and I turned to him. He shrugged his shoulders and said, say no. So I did. All I heard was that sound signifying that I had done something incorrect. So I pulled out the book again and it asked me the same thing. This time I answered yes, and all of a sudden those two doors on the side opened. And then dozens upon dozens of soldiers poured into the room. They all approached Link and began attacking him repeatedly. It didn't take long for him to die, since he only had 3 hearts. Then, Link spun around and he collapsed onto the floor, as he usually does when he dies. Instead of giving me a choice if I wanted to continue, the game suddenly took me to what appeared to be the Dark World's version of Death Mountain. I walked forward, and all of a sudden, I saw an unfamiliar character sprite. If anything, it looked like the hacker modified Ganon's sprite to appear red and gave him a few extra features, like devil horns. He was also holding that trident/spear, except it was shaded black. It looks like he was made to resemble Satan. So I approached the Satan-like sprite, and he spoke to me when I got close enough. He said, your punishment is long overdue. Suddenly, he began spinning his lance around, and I couldn't move. Just then, a laser beam shot out of the lance and it hit me, killing Link instantly. Instead of the screen turning black, with Link just lying there, the entire screen turned red and Link's sprite suddenly turned completely black. And that was it. The game just froze there. Nothing moved or anything like that. I pressed every button, but nothing happened. I turned to Ray again, and we just shrugged. I took the game out of the SNES and just looked at it one last time. And that was when I noticed that the game had no circuit board inside. How's that even possible? I called Ray over to examine this. He's always been much more savvy about old game hardware and into disassembling stuff like old gaming consoles, televisions, radios, etc., and he knew right away something wasn't right. I popped the game back into the console to see if it would work again, but this time, all it gave me was that glitchy screen like the first time. I tried again and again, but it all went in vain. The next morning, Ray disassembled the cartridge and discovered there was indeed no circuit board inside of the cartridge. It was just a shell. He then reassembled it and we tried again and again, but to no avail. The game had never given us what it originally did that first night. How it functioned that night, we'll never know. I'm not the kind of person who instantly latches onto the latest trend. A majority of the works that I've seen come out from the conveyor belts of large companies or the dark shadows of the internet don't really appeal to me for some reason. Maybe I'm just the type of person who isn't that easily excited. That one guy people think to be the most boring person they've ever met. And to add to that, my life isn't really that interesting. I have a bland office job, 2 cats and a best friend named Mike. However, when I'm not working at the office, spending time with my cats or hanging out with Mike on Skype, I play the games and watch the shows that actually do manage to appeal to me, the ones that stand out and have something truly special to them. The latest trend that I had seen, one that I considered truly special, is a game called Undertale. Released on the 15th of September, people got their hands on the game and it almost instantly spread like wildfire. It was the latest thing that people liked, and even I thought it had a lot of potential. I wanted to know more, so I rang up Mike. I forgot to mention that Mike is an avid gamer who has an absolutely massive collection of games. He actually ran out of space on his bookshelf to put his games, so he started hanging some from the apartment ceiling in order to decorate the place. I got quite a chuckle out of that, to his embarrassment. He's also trained himself in the art of coding, and he started developing a game with Game Maker Studio. I'm getting off track. Anyways, I'd called him to know what this game was about and why there was so much hype for it. Upon the mention of the word Undertale, Mike had gone completely nuts about how heartwarming and revolutionary this game really was. I told him to calm down, but he just wouldn't stop going on about this game. So I thanked him, hung up and decided to purchase the game for myself. And, what do you know? He was right. The game was good, even in my eyes. And it sure knew how to affect the player. I know that even more after what happened to me. But it's better to keep that for later. When Flowey betrayed me, I gasped in surprise. When Toriel hugged me just outside of the exit of the ruins, it gave me a little heartache. When I entered Snowdon and saw the two brothers' skeletal shenanigans, I laughed. For the first time, in what seemed like forever, a game like this had made me laugh. I wanted to call Mike back, but I was too busy getting enthralled in this amazing game. Within the span of about 5 hours, I had beaten the neutral run. It is then I called Mike back and learned there were 2 other runs possible to accomplish pacifist and genocide. That night I made it a personal note to do a pacifist run when I had the free time. But I had never made it a note to do a genocide run. In fact, I had never even considered killing the characters I'd sort of come to love. It feels like they were programmed to seem almost human, in a way, like all of them were long-lost friends you had just come to meet again or family all together in a long-needed reunion. So I soon completed 2 pacifist runs after resetting my old save file, while still staying away from the genocide route as much as I could. I thought this game was even more amazing due to the final boss battle and ending, which nearly invoked tears for me twice. So after the second run, I decided to leave the game alone. I put it in its own file called Do Not Touch and let my digital friends live out their happy ending. The happy ending that they deserve. It was the day after that I joined several forums and discussions about the game. I started becoming rather active on the game's subreddit, /r/Undertale. I sincerely loved the Undertale community and shared all of the Sully inside jokes and skeletal puns they had to offer. I had the genocide run spoiled for me, but I didn't really care, since I wasn't planning on doing it anyways. I fit in. I was a member of the community. I gained some friends. Everything was going perfectly fine. Well, until I stumbled upon a small data mining site in the corners of the internet. Well, the 30-second page of Google search results anyway. It was primarily focused on Undertale at the moment due to the game apparently having a treasure trove of secrets. The community on the site was a tad rude to newcomers, but I tried my best to fit in and contribute. After a few hours on the site, someone told me in order to truly fit in, you'd have to be a data miner yourself. So I put on my virtual hard hat and decided to do some digging in the game's code, unsure of what I would find. It was then I realized I was extremely unskilled at data mining, and to me, every single line of code was just gibberish and syntax. I had spent 30 minutes searching through a language that I didn't even understand. That's when I remembered what Mike could do. So I rang up Mike again and asked him if he could do a little bit of Undertale data mining for me. He was eager to do so and said that he would text me the results. I nodded my head affirmatively, even though Mike couldn't see me doing so. He hung up shortly after. I leaned back in my swiveling chair and opened up some other games on Steam, waiting for the data mining results to come. A couple of hours later, Mike sent me a text. I was too busy playing Team Fortress 2 that I didn't have the time to reply. He sent me another text. The match still wasn't over, so I kept playing. He sent me yet another text, so I let out a sigh and quit the match. I picked up my smartphone. Dude. You're not gonna believe what I found, Mike said. I replied, what did you find? A download link, Mike said. I replied, in the code? Yes, Mike said. Check your email. It was then I received an email notification. Mike had sent me the download link. It was to a file entitled _root free. The site link had taken me to look shady enough, with advertisements in every corner. It was hard to look at the actual page. And of course, there were about 5 different download buttons, 4 of which sent me to different "Congratulations, you won" sort of scams. However, the 5th download link, the small one at the very bottom of the page, actually worked. _root free was installing. Within a few minutes it had installed, and I had opened the file. The introduction of the game began to play. Legends say that those who climb the mountain never return. I texted Mike, saying that it was up and functional. He wanted to see what was going on, so he said he was coming over to my house. Keep in mind that he lives hours away. He told me not to play it yet, so I waited for around 20 minutes on that one title screen. I was distracting myself by watching a television show. It was then I received another text from Mike. Yo, I'm stuck in traffic, sorry. Start playing the game and when I get there tell me what happened. I agreed and entered the very first area of the game, the Golden Flower Patch. I moved Frisk around a bit and nothing really seemed different from normal. The controls were the same, the graphics were the same and the music was the same. The only thing different was the underline root 3v73 text floating in the top left. I walked over to Fly, everything was still generally as normal as can be. I then moved into Fly's friendliness pellets and got the kill or be killed speech. I was determined to do a neutral run and a pacifist run. So that is what I did, and as I sort of expected, nothing was changed at all. After I completed the neutral route and then the pacifist route, I decided to leave this version of the game alone. I was planning to be done with it, but when I went to close the window, I realized something. This version of the game was called the underline route 3. Route 3 must be referring to the genocide route, since nearly nothing changed on the neutral or pacifist routes besides the text in the corner. It was only an assumption, a suspicion. But I decided to go for it. Besides, the dialogue this time around seemed, well, empty. As if it didn't have that special feeling to it anymore. The characters just didn't seem that real this time around. I assumed it was because I had seen the same dialogue so many times before that it had lost some of its meaning. I was a little disappointed that some of the original spark had faded away. After thinking for a little while, I decided to do the genocide run for the first time. I reset my pacifist save file and encountered the first Wimson. I knew what I had to do, so I did it. For the first time, I had hit the fight button with full intent. I had never fought another monster before, not even in the neutral run. The only reason that I received the neutral ending in the first place was because I didn't meet the other requirements for the pacifist ending. But now I no longer plan to meet the requirements for pacifism. I had to do the genocide run now, just out of curiosity. I wanted to see what could change. After Wimson fell, I stormed around the area and killed as many monsters as I could. I just had to show them no mercy in order to advance. I entered a battle with another Wimson, and this time I noticed something had changed. The name I had input, Chara, had disappeared from the bottom area of the screen. It was a minor change, but I was just glad that my suspicions were confirmed. I continued the genocide run. I slayed tons of monsters, more than usual. There were definitely over 100 monsters in this version of the runes. After that, nothing really eventful happened until I had entered Toriel's house. Everything seemed darker in color than normal, and all the lights were off. I couldn't find Toriel in her chair, so I looked throughout the house everywhere except the basement. She was nowhere to be found. I decided to go downwards into the basement, and there was still no sign of Toriel until I approached the final room, the room with the door to Snowden. I found her sprite standing there, staring at me with a 1,000-yard glare. I walked up to her as combat initiated. Fire magic began to rain down as Toriel put on a serious face. I dodged as skillfully as I could. It was my turn to fight, and Toriel now had a look of fear on her face. I selected the fight option. The attack came raining down. She spoke about how I was not her child anymore. She told me that she was scared of my arrival and had no choice but to flee into the basement. She warned the others in Snowden to flee and sent Dr. Alfie's a message to evacuate as many monsters as possible. Before she had a chance to say anything else, Toriel faded into dust with a broken smile as I won the battle. This was very different from the normal fight, and it seemed darker than the normal genocide route. I walked around the exit rooms for a bit looking for anything hidden, but nothing was there, so I walked into Snowden Forest. Not a sound was heard besides Frisk's footsteps hitting the snow. I cleared the puzzles Papyrus had laid out without a challenge, and continued onwards to the rock formation bridge. I eventually made it to Snowden Town. As I walked throughout the town, I began to feel sorry for the monsters. Even though the game still didn't have much of an original charm like it should do anymore, I still felt bad. As I said earlier, this game knows how to toy with your emotions. This is when I realized the entire place was completely empty and devoid of all life. Besides a singular soul, Papyrus. He was standing where the player would usually encounter him in the normal game. Before he had a chance to finish his sentence, the player went into combat. With one fatal swing, Papyrus was decapitated. Papyrus's head was in the middle of saying his usual dialogue, but another swing came down without warning, turning Papyrus to dust. All that remained was his cape, still visible in the overworld. Frisk walked over it without my input as I just sat there, amazed at how different this version of the game is. I continued onwards into Waterfall to see what Undyne would be like. But Waterfall was empty as well. Not even the cheerful monster kid was there. Nothing really interesting happened due to the entire place being abandoned until I encountered Undyne standing on the mountain where you'd usually encounter her. After a brief speech about how I was a threat to all monsters everywhere, I was in a fight with Undyne the Undying. I knew this was one of the harder boss fights, so I decided to stay cautious. I also wanted to mention that I didn't notice the fact that my LV and EXP levels were higher even though I wasn't doing anything. I didn't notice the fact that my name would sometimes briefly reappear as CHARA. I didn't even notice the fact that my screen size was zooming in and out at certain points. I was too focused on the game and the major changes you would notice, and now I'm too focused on this fight and how to avoid Undyne's attacks. I ended up being hit a couple of times, but so far I thought I was doing good. It was at that point that the music got quieter and my LV increased at an alarming rate. After a little while, my LV halted at 1173 and the music was completely gone. Undyne and her attacks disappeared. Even the bullet board was completely erased. I was free to move around the area. I began moving right as the battle interface slid into the left of the screen. Eventually there was nothing left besides my green, colored SOUL and the same text on the top left corner that spelled underline root 3B73. I continued moving my SOUL to the right. I was getting no results so I tried turning back to the left, but the game wouldn't let me. I couldn't move in any other direction but right. So I kept going. After about 5 minutes a message appeared. HP fully restored. I was just confused as to what was going on. In my mind, none of this was making an inch of sense. I thought that if I continued, I would get at least some form of an explanation, so I pressed Z in hopes something would happen. I was immediately teleported to the entrance of Hotlands next to the water cooler. The water cooler itself was empty, and the waves of heat were visibly running through the screen. I continued through the lonely area and entered the lab. Nobody was there, as expected. The place seemed run down and in a state of disrepair. There were holes in the walls and what seemed to be paint splattered on the floor. The entrance to the true lab was sealed tightly. Without warning, the player character went up to it and attacked it, bursting it open. I walked inside and it seemed nobody was there. After a few minutes of searching I turned for the exit. But then I heard something drop. The player character turned back and, without my permission, shuffled themselves over to a room I hadn't seen before. In the room were a crowd of monsters, with Alphys among them. My player character immediately entered the battle. Oh, boy. I worriedly thought. The number of my LV was not being displayed anymore. Act and Mercy wouldn't work, so I selected item. The only things inside my inventory were duplicates of the same item, dust. So I went back to fight and landed 3 hits on the crowd. The amount of damage done was so large it went out of the screen's boundaries. Before Alphys had a chance to say anything, she was killed with a singular swipe. I was not in control of this action, as usual. The battle screen closed and in place of the monsters was a large crowd of dust. But then I heard some robotic beeps, and suddenly I was sent into the fight versus Mediton NEO. He said, "You sick freak. Why would you do this? I can't be a star without my audience you just killed. Die." Then an insanely hard boss fight began. For the next few hours, I did the boss fight, but eventually, I killed Mediton, but my character decided it wasn't enough. She slashed Mediton into scrap metal. After the boss fight, the player character turned the giant fans in the background on as the dust blew away. I found the keys needed to power the elevator and was sent a new home. The mysterious phone call that one would normally get was absent, and I was immediately placed within a shaking elevator with red lights flashing rapidly, which made me jump in my seat. After the elevator ride, I simply made my way to where Asgore was. But I forgot something. Before you can get to Asgore on a genocide route, you'd have to beat Sans first. I didn't realize this until I was immediately placed into battle with him. And Sans was standing there, smashing my blue heart against the walls of the bullet board, steaming mad. I didn't know what to do, but at 2 HP I selected fight. I was surprised the button worked in battle. But just as I was about to deliver a hit onto Sans, he grabbed the slash animation and aimed it back at me, causing my SOUL to shatter. I sat there, with a confused look on my face, wondering what was going on. I sighed, and after the silent game over screen I was placed right back in the final corridor. Hey, kiddo. So listen up. You're not supposed to be here. And you know that fully well, don't you? Hey, you must have been pretty determined to find this place. So lively and happy. The perfect timeline to the inches. Until you came along. All of the laughter turned into screaming. Alfie tried to hide them somewhere, but you found out. And you killed my brother. I saw it all, kid. You dirty brother killer. I was placed into battle with Sans once more as he again threw me against the walls. I tried to fight once more, but he held my SOUL in place and rang down the attack on me again, killing me. I tried again. Heh. That's the face of someone who's died twice in a row. Maybe we can make it a third? Battle after battle, I lost and Sans won. Sometimes Gaster blasters would show up and track my movements, making it impossible to dodge. Sometimes bones would shoot out in a large wave, which is also impossible to dodge. Not a bead of sweat formed on Sans' forehead as I kept dying over and over and over. This was about the 40th time and I still haven't gotten close to beating him. Why do you keep trying? I'm always gonna be here. There's no way to get past me. Face it, kid. You're beat. Get dunked on. More battles. More confusion. More frustration. It went on and on and on and I couldn't stop. I tried every trick in the book. I couldn't even consider using the mercy button anymore, it refused to work, just like in the True Lab battle. So after a long time I just decided to reboot the game and see what happens. A long time ago, two races ruled over Earth, Humans and Monsters. They sealed the monsters underground with a magic spell. But now, they've all went missing. And that's your fault, isn't it? The battle screen appeared, MEGALOVANIA, played and I was put into the same impossible fight. But this time, something was different. Sans was talking. Kid, you know you'll never beat me. Do I have to explain that again to ya? Heh, why bother? You already know, don't you? You'll never get past me. Not in the state this place is inches. I tried thinking of a solution, but I was lost. I had no clue how to get past him. More attacks, more deaths, more of the same. As time went on, I saw that Sans attacked faster. Just ever so slightly faster. And due to this, I died faster than usual. I groaned. I kept groaning. I swear at the monitor. I just wanted to see what would happen if I beat Sans. I just wanted to find out. As I was in the middle of that thought, my SOUL was no longer in my control. It was moving on its own. The SOUL maneuvered around Sans' attacks with agility and skill I had never seen before. Sweat formed on the surface of Sans' forehead as his smile began to slowly lose its meaning. Sans kept fighting, but this time I was winning. Or they were winning. The cold-hearted one who did things without my permission. The one who made the world a living hell. The one who would kill everything and everyone. Sans started to speak. He wanted them to stop trying. He just wanted everything to go back to the way it was once before. And it was here I started to feel a little bad. What have I made of this world? This timeline is destroyed. I played God and I destroyed a world. I showed them no mercy, and Sans decided to return the favor. Maybe I do deserve this. I sighed and smiled as I went to close the window and leave the game be. But as soon as I moused over the red X, a blow was delivered onto Sans. Red oozed from his sprite as he stumbled down onto the ground. Heh, Were you not satisfied with 10 monsters? Or 20 monsters? Or 30? Or over 100? You're going to go past me and you'll make what's left of this timeline a living hell. So whatever you do, just remember this, it's too late now. You can't go back, even if you want to. But I know you don't regret anything. You dirty brother killer. I'm going to grill these. Papyrus, do you want anything? And Sans died off screen. I sat there, forced to watch as I was no longer in control. The only thing I could do is try to close the window, which wouldn't work. My character walked up to Asborn with a singular swipe. He was knocked down. His overworld sprite turned to dust as my character proceeded onwards. Monster sprites appeared while the character was walking, laying motionless on the floor and faded to gray. My character walked past them as they faded to dust shortly after. And my character proceeded onwards, determined and focused. But onwards to where? My character was headed towards the barrier, and when they stepped foot on it, they turned around. Their face wasn't a Frisk's anymore but Chara's. The game closed itself, deleted all traces of its existence, and shut down the download link. Nobody would know what happened and nobody ever will. When my friend finally arrived, I told him the game could only be played once and it was really fun. He was delighted, but I could never tell him the truth of what that game was. We sat there, watching sports and eating pizza. I still felt guilty. Guilty over a bunch of video game characters, pixels on a screen. I said they didn't seem that real before, but now they seemed like real people to me. Like they were once again like family. And without hesitation I chopped them to bits. And now, as I'm typing this at 3 in the morning, I still feel bad about what I've done. I can't even rest my head. This game has been on my mind ever since I've completed it. Just before writing this, I searched for any remnant of the game left. And I found nothing. Well, nothing except for this. To Adam Haslett at Yandex.com from utrout3 at mail.com. Don't you know how to greet a new friend? So, how's Sam doing at the moment? Is he acting like a toddler still? Because if he is, then I have absolutely no choice but to fire him since he fucked up the original recording studio, and there's also the fact that we have to live in this fucking dump temporarily because of what happened. Why didn't anyone consider Tenpenny Tower, since it would have kept the raiders and the feral ghouls at bay?
Now, take it easy, Harold. Sam's been doing fine, and he's been behaving quite well, since he has been regretting being that much of a baby since that pull of the rugby a few videos back, after he blew up that recording video. Didn't make those actions okay though. But why return to these videos, when you know that they will demonetize you for repetitious content?
She does have a point there, dude. Then again, out of everything that could have been done to prevent everything, that hiatus shouldn't really have happened to begin with. It's funny, though, seeing that Sam got his ass beat by Mary with a fucking pen, although I was wondering where she even got that thing, since the kitchen got fucked in the explosion too. Say, Mary, has anything been fine with yourself since that incident?
Aside from the fact that I have to share a bath with everyone and the fact that we could have just picked a different location like Harold said. Yeah, I have been fine, though Sam has been behaving well like Anthera said. It was a shame I had to knock his ass into a coma. When it came to the stupidity of the shit that all of us had done, I kinda wished I knocked you and Harold out and just kept Anthony and Anthera narrating for you both along with myself and Gordon. Then again, if anything, I was wondering what happened to everyone back home really.
Actually, I was wondering how everyone's been back home. I'm betting they are worried sick, since they heard about the whole recording studio incident that Sam had caused. And on top of that, they actually thought we died up until Harold called them and said we are all fine and Sam was being a total dumbass canoe with us. Okay, easy now, Anthony, while I did call him an asshole. But I didn't call him a dumbass canoe. But anyways, what are we gonna do now, since we can't really be found out when we get back to New Mexico? Plus, if anything, I just want to get back home and see them again. Hardly do we have any cash to get to an airport, and even if we do, I doubt there are any planes that are functional aside from nabbing a vertebrate from those enclave motherfuckers.
Well, we don't have to, Harold. I already have a beacon to call for one anyways. Or do you all want the rafflecopter to go swah 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 swah?
We probably need to do that outside Megaton though. Plus if anything, I doubt that we would be able to find ourselves lucky enough to evade police. That is if we do end up getting back at the house.
Anyways, let's just call the thing in and head on home. I actually miss being with the others.
Any smartest remarks or dumbest insults, Harold?
No, let's hop on and let's go.
Oh. A vertebrate. Wait, Sam's vertebrate. That must mean Harold. Anthony. Anthera.
Hey Megan. Sorry for making you worried sick about me and the other two. Just Sam decided to be an asshole and bomb the recording studio because of what happened. Yeah. I'm sorry as well.
Well, I do apologize for doing that to you all. And plus me, Mary and Mike are just gonna head back to our place and wait until the studio gets rebuilt fully.
Anyways, I hope you all had some fun with the video, and once again I do apologize for the quality, and I thank you all for watching or listening and hope you all have a good time.